I'm really excited to welcome Chris van Durme. Did I pronounce that right? Hey, Chris.
That's right enough. Thank you.
So,
Hi, Alison.
yes, I got to meet Chris in your neighbor's home in Brooklyn a couple of weeks ago, and I was so taken by you. And I couldn't wait to get to know more. You're obviously somebody that is so remarkable. But what stood out to me so much is that in the face of so much medical and just challenges, just so many unknowns, you had this incredible peace and this calm that I was really astounded by. And I wanted to know more. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So
Yeah. So,
where should I start? I guess
tell me,
part of the
start. Yeah.
so I guess we can see it in three phases. The diagnosis of the illness that I have that you mentioned, which is a brain tumor that's now a brain cancer. That happened when I was 17 years old in a very interesting way, which is by all the doctors called fortuitous. I had headaches. I just couldn't handle any light, any sounds, anything. And I was taken to the hospital and kind of they did all sorts of tests, including some that are supposed to be very painful. And they came with like a very long needle down my spine. And I told them to tell me when they were gonna come in, kind of just brace myself. And they had before that they had asked me like how much is your pain level out of 10? And I was like, I think it's at 10. And then they were kind of looking at me like, yeah, probably not. And at the moment I asked that question, they were like looking at each other like, oh shit, they were already in. And it's supposed to be very, very, very painful. And I didn't feel it at all.
Wow.
That meant that I was indeed at 10. And the only thing that came as a result of all the tests that I had, and I stayed like a couple of days, I think 3-4 days in the hospital maybe, was that on the MRI there was some image and there was some stain in my brain, which I came to understand was a tumor. I was underage. I was 17 then, so they
Wow.
talked about it more to my parents than they did to me, and we just needed to monitor it. I traveled to another city to have a test made, which I now know was to understand if the tumor was active, meaning cancerous, which we call grade 3 and 4. So malignous, basically, if you want. Whereas it's before it's benign if it's grade 1 or 2. And so it wasn't, and it was a kind of tumor that's kind of slow growing. So we kind of just had to monitor it. I monitored first every 6 months, and then every year, and then every 2 years, and then at some point every 5 years. And then we kind of forgot about it. And I think that was the first big thing that happened to me, is I was allowed to kind of, grow up normally and not worried about anything, not concerned about my
Yeah.
health. And then I think about 26 years old, and I was working in a hospital, and I was passing by the MRI every day because, those were some of my colleagues. And I thought maybe I should go and check this because I think it's been a long time. And it had actually been 6 years. And we did the MRI, and then the image came back, and my doctor gives me a call, panics. It's like, Chris, the tumor grew. It's quadrupled in size. Like we need
Oh,
something. We need to do
no.
something about this. So I was like, oh shit, that's not good. I didn't know anything about what it meant and so on. And then we basically, at that time, I didn't tell anyone about it. I just told my partner, who is a doctor. It's not my partner anymore, but she is still a doctor, and she kind of helped me understand and also connect to some people that, like, that she had trust in. And interestingly, I did a biopsy to kind of take a little piece of the tumor. I realized it was not cancerous, so we could take it out. And then the doctors were like, we can operate on you. We can do a surgery. I still wanted to make sure that, like we were doing it right. And I discussed with some people, and one of the doctors in the hospital told me, absolutely don't do it, because my boss, who was the one that was proposing to operate, number one, he's gonna ask you to pay cash. Otherwise, it's not him; it's one of his assistants that will do it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that happened in the end. So we didn't want to do that. Like, it didn't seem like the right choice to us. And number two, he doesn't know anything about this kind of tumors. He's basically gonna make you a robot, and he's gonna destroy your life. I was like, okay,
Oh, my
thanks.
God.
That's the moment I realized healthcare is even in Belgium, where we have a healthcare system that's much more developed and much fairer, I think, or much more accessible than it is in the US, that healthcare is not fair. It's not fair to everyone. It's just because I had contacts. I worked in the hospital. My girlfriend at the time was a doctor. Kind of that helped me navigate some of those things. I was able through my network to then, in a few weeks, contact or identify 3 or 4 big surgeons or neurosurgeons, and then discuss, and then and some would say, I don't think it's operable. I don't think you should do surgery. You should wait. Some would say, I can operate on you. And we ended up being top of the pile with the best surgeon that I could find for that specialty, which was in France. So thankfully, that was in the end taken care of by the Belgian Social Security, who is Dr. Dufault in Montpellier, and who operates awake. So you're awake during your surgery.
Lord.
Yes. And in the end, that was scary, but reassuring as well, because, it's the kind of things that you see in movies where he operates like, I don't know, a guitarist, like that's playing a guitar while they're playing, or someone while they're playing the violin or something. So it's like, yeah, it's quite an experience. And as of that moment, basically in my life, I chose to take 6 months and kind of travel, experience a lot of things that I wanted to experience. And I wanted to be ready to die when I came in the surgery. Because even if I woke up,
Wow.
which I obviously did, I wasn't sure I would be the same person. Because the zone of the brain that the tumor was in and is in between the mobility part and the personality, and the part that processes emotions. And so the reason why we stopped the surgery was that at some point I couldn't recognize emotions anymore. So they were right in the other hospital, where they would have operated without that technique of awake surgery. They would have
Wow.
pins on me to kind of understand the connection between, for example, my fingers and some parts of the brain, like the leg and things like that. So
Oh
they would
my
have
God.
seen, because they use a little tool that creates a local short circuit and basically simulates what happens if you take that neurological that part of the brain out.
So you need to be awake to like
To answer
signal, I'm
questions, to
here.
signal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up being, I think, 4 hours in surgery, moving my leg constantly. At the end, I was having like spasm because I was so tired. And then looking at pictures of things and recognizing, this is a table, this is a horse, this is a cat, all of those things. You're constantly talking to someone. And it's very interesting because you do a sort of evaluation before and after of your
Right.
mobility physically, but also mentally or intellectually. And then you're like, how many numbers in a row can you remember? And the absolute number doesn't matter, but you just want to, in your recovery, you want to get back to the same number that you were before. And then you come out of that and you're yourself. That's number one. That was big. You recognize people, you remember your name, you remember the time it is. I even made a joke about it that I didn't recognize a friend that was there. And then you start the recovery. And I think that journey was a very humbling one for me, because you're, in a way, you're back to childhood. You're like a baby again. You're learning how to walk again, because your
Wow.
connections, you have so much blood in your brain that everything is kind of blurry. So you need to relearn everything. Even speaking, I had kind of a speech therapist that came home. I had someone to help me with my hand movements, someone for more for the lower body. So you kind of go through those months of recovery and therapy, physical therapy and occupational therapy. But and that's kind
You're
of very.
25 at this point, yeah? You're
I'm 20,
25,
27 then, yes.
27, and then are you working at the time? Do you have to put everything
Yes.
on hold?
I was
You're not
working, but
married at the
thankfully,
time? Yeah.
no, I was not married. I was working, but they had a great insurance. I was basically on medical leave, but fully paid. So
Right.
that was nothing to worry about for me.
Yeah.
And I actually recovered very fast. And I was supposed to be off for 6 months, and I ended up being off for like 3 months, and said, like, I want to go back to work. And I
Wow.
was I was in consulting at the time at BCG, Boston Consulting Group, big consulting firm, very demanding,
Yeah.
highly demanding job with, like, a high number of hours, working hours per week, and so on. And everyone around me was like, why are you going back? And I was like, look, I've had time to think for the first time in those 3 months off, because I also took 3 months, as I mentioned, I took 6 months to travel before, but I took 3 months to kind of prepare the surgery. I mean, which was really kind of prepare myself. As I said
Yeah,
earlier, I wanted to be ready to die, which meant I don't have any regrets to that point. There's not
right.
something I absolutely wanted to do that I haven't done. So I had a dear friend in Argentina that I wanted to kind of see again because I hadn't seen him in years. I want to travel with him. I took a little bit of time with my partner at the time. And then I was like, okay, let's go. But in those months, I also thought a lot about what do I want to accomplish in my life,
Hmm.
I'm not a religious person. I'm a very scientific person. I think we're just on a huge planet going at the speed of light in space, and at some point, everything is going to come to dust. So I don't think there's a goal in life, but I wanted to have purpose in mind, especially if I kind of recovered and like survived this and got over the surgery, and that for the first time gave purpose to my life. And that's part of where the piece that you talked about came. It just made me a better person. I think a happier person. I knew since then I
Hmm.
knew I wanted to kind of leave a positive mark. And my only goal, it's pretty simple, is kind of is to think when I die that I left the planet in a better state than it would have been if I hadn't been there.
Hmm.
Um, and that's in a social way and an environmental way. So I got back into consulting, but with the very clear goal of going into E or S from ESG, so environmental or sustainable, and starting with the social side. I'm a very social person. I'm very extrovert. Like I enjoy I enjoy being on my own to do my sports and so on, but I enjoy being with other people and interacting, and that's how I think, and that's how I get energized by having conversations like this. And so yeah, I was like, I want to help people, and that's where I kind of started to kind of push and turn around my career. I stayed a few more years at BCG to kind of build the foundation and I needed to be successful and to work afterwards and have positive effects for charities, nonprofits. And then I switched into the environmental space about 5 years back. And and it's the first time I think then that I started to like myself, I would say.
You started
And
to like yourself?
yes,
Wow. Can I pause here? Did
sure.
I'm wondering when you go through something so remarkable like that, that most people your age are not going through, did you feel like your outlook on what matters changed? And did you have the same memories? Did you have to like train for your memories to come back, or was the surgery so brilliantly done where like like you are relearning everything, but do you feel like you're a different person
I
before
felt like I was a
after?
different person, but not because of the memories. I kept all my memories. I remembered everything. Except, obviously, sorry, some part of the surgery where it's blurry because you're still, and a little bit of a funk
Oh,
because you still start the surgery being with an anesthesia. Um, no, I remembered everything, but I was a different person. Mostly when I came back for one reason is that I had difficulty to manage and deal with emotions and especially stress. Stress was suddenly overwhelming me when it had never overwhelmed me. It had always fueled me in my life. I was always the most efficient, my back against the wall. I was someone that worked last minute. I just couldn't do that anymore. Because then I remember coming back to BCG on my first project, and
wow.
in a whole day I couldn't do anything, any work. I was just a blank page and I was like frozen. And that's a moment where I also realized I had to do something about it. And I realized something else about the health system, at least at the time in Belgium, but I think it hasn't changed, and in most places, is just people forget about the mental side of things and the mental health.
Mm.
No one ever talked to me about talking to someone and asking for help. It's a friend that had gone through a burnout, that at the time was like, Chris, I think you might need to talk to someone that's not one of your friends and so on, where you can just say everything, complain about everything, cry if you want, like, and no judgment, just go to see your shrink. And that's something that I would say is very acceptable in Paris, is even fashionable in Paris, but it's
Yeah.
wasn't really the case in Belgium. It was a sign of weakness.
Did you feel that way, or did it just not occur to you?
It didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to
Okay.
me. But that was, to me, that was eye-opening that it didn't. Because as soon as he told me, I did, and it helped me from like day one. And so I started to kind of look more in towards that direction of, why are we so proud? Why do we have this ego that
Hmm.
and that started to interest me also more in how do people function, like how do their brain work, so the development, the humility that everything can be gone in a second, and you can have to relearn everything, and kind of just not being, why are we proud that we're good at certain things, like sometimes we don't, if we have done all the work, yes, then be proud of the work that you put in, but the end result is also some things that you can't control. And I think it brought more humility, much less ego, more interest and curiosity in other people's stories, not just what they show, but what's behind it. And they don't kind of tell you in the first seconds, except if you are at one of Chris's dinners and it just comes up because it's the setup. And that was quite unexpected. But yeah, so I was a different person, but not because of the memories.
Wow. So I'm curious too, like, is your energy back? Is it different? Because it sounds like you're like a different person.
I was always someone very energetic, but if I can say it like this, I think the color of my energy probably changed.
Okay.
I I have high energy, and that's pretty constant, and that's been a constant in my whole life. There's been moments, especially because of treatments, chemotherapy or radiation, where I was highly tired. It's a little bit the case these last few weeks. Um, but apart from that, no. I was always an energetic person. I always kind of needed to get that energy out. I was also a very tense person when I was younger. I was kind of, I was snapping easily at people. I was very susceptible to any comments. That evolved over time, but started a little bit before the surgeries. One thing that helped me drastically for that was doing sports, just getting rid of the negative energy. I mean, if you get rid of the energy, you get rid of the negative one. But
I
definitely the
heard you're a fan
surgeries.
of tennis.
Yeah, I mean, the shirt also. I mean, I
Yeah,
have
the Tour
I
de
have a
France.
U.S. Open shirt and I have a Knicks hat. So yes,
Yeah. I'm wondering too, as you're a guy who is driven, it sounds like you are living and moving with a lot of purpose. Tell me about Act 3.
Act 3. What do you mean?
You said there are 3 stages.
Oh
Your
yes.
life is
Okay.
in 3 stages.
So yes, there was a diagnosis, then there was the realization, and the let's say the first treatments, which were really kind of life changing because I had to go through another surgery 3 years later because it had grown again. Third one was meeting my wife and kind of choosing to kind of live my life normally. Because one of the things that comes in your head is like, what am I aiming for? Should I live like anyone else, hoping that I can live forever? Do I make that choice of still being, having hope, being, like being hopeful, being optimistic, and then planning for the long term, even though the probability is high, it's never zero. I mean, there's so much research and happening right now. Like I read a piece yesterday about researchers in Florida that are maybe finding a way to target any cancer cells, not a specific cancer, not the
Wow.
brain or or any other, like not the heart or not, but like colon cancer is something that has happened a few times in my family that I'm aware about. There's treatments there. I have a friend that had pancreatic cancer, and that they gave 4 months to. He ended up living 4 years. He's the one that kind of fueled a lot of that third phase, I would say, even
Hmm.
though we ended up making very different choices. His name is Gilles Van Durme. He was a dear friend. He passed away in September, and
I'm sorry.
he has, yeah, thank you. He created a nonprofit that's called Profitivism, which is basically profit profitivity, if we can say it. But basically, it's a philosophy at the border of enjoying life, the profit, but in French, profit is also enjoy. So enjoy as much as you can, but to also be positive. So it's positivity and enjoyment, if you want.
Okay.
And he created that nonprofit, and he was the most like positive, smiling person. And like I had a long discussion with him a few years back when it became a little bit more serious with me, and we had to discuss about our first chemo treatment. And that was right about the time where I met my wife, and he was so like positive, like that he was happier than ever, and I kind of related to that.
Hmm.
But he was just a sunshine. Like he was a ray of sunshine for everyone around him, and he still is in a way. And he had very clear pillars in his philosophy of life, in his philosophy of profitivism. And it was like a holistic approach to your health. So it's not only doing the radiation chemo, but it's also taking care of your health and by doing like chiro, physical therapy, acupuncture, like, really kind of looking at other ways, ancient ways, like Chinese medicine, ancient medicine, and so on. Taking food seriously, just eating good food like organic or biological, bio in Europe, but also like eating less. And I went to see someone that was an oncologist and stopped and just started giving advice on food, on nutrition, because that's one of the things that's really forgotten by most doctors. My surgeon laughed at my face when I said I was changing the way I ate, but you can
Why?
have, because according to him, there's only science doesn't confirm that it's better. So there's only surgery and chemo and radiation that works. But I also
So
understand, like, he
interesting.
dedicated his whole life to one thing. He needs to believe that that's really what makes the difference. So like, I started like eating less meat, less dairy, drinking less alcohol, cutting sugar nearly entirely, and then doing sports. That was an important one, but also sleep, irrespective of your sleep. Like, go to sleep with your stomach empty, then your sleep can concentrate on doing what it's supposed to do, which is very important for people with brain tumors, because it's actually cleaning the brain. That's the moment like the brain is cleaning, is when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing all of that, and so yeah, in the end, you kind of become a little bit of a different person with everyone that influences you around you, and all of those things that I kind of took on with me, and that made me even more energetic to see someone like that, like being able to kind of have the impact he had. Like, he was helping children, going to hospitals with like kids that were ill and so on, and motivated me to kind of do it my own path, which was not building a nonprofit, but was creating a family, but doing the good I could, more on the work side.
Yeah, tell me about your family.
And so I met my wife in the start of COVID. Her name is Sabine. She is an exceptional person, obviously. Otherwise, I would not have chosen her. And mostly, otherwise, she wouldn't be with me anymore. Because to the contrary to me, she had the choice to face these issues and these struggles that we're facing, definitely facing with me. And she said, I'm staying. And that was pretty inspiring to me. So we met at the start of COVID. I was traveling down to the south of France because we were all sick of staying in the same small apartment. She was living in New York at the time. She was also sick of staying in her small apartment. So I got back to Belgium and then went to France to a holiday house. And I was in the region with two friends, including one that knew her. And it was a little bit serendipity. Like, we met, and I think from the first night we liked each other, and from the second night we kind of we kissed, and the rest is history. And we're since married since 2022. We got married in her parents' place in the south of France where we met, and now we have a little baby girl that's 15 months old. That's called Rosalie.
Rosalie, how beautiful. And tell me, I was so surprised when we were at that dinner where you said you're going through all of these challenges and you said I'm recording everything I can in a private podcast for my daughter and we're hoping for a second kid. Tell me more about this.
Yes, so I need to rewind a little bit to Rosalie's birth. The day after her birth, and we had completely forgot about it because she was born 8 days later than the foreseen date. And so we're waking up after night one with her, and I have my phone that kind of pings me and like, oh, you have like an MRI, and I'm like, shit, my check-in is today. I completely forgot about it. So I jumped. It was like amazing weather, like the sun was shining. I run down, I jump on an e-bike, and then like I run, and it's like 30 minutes, like full speed, and I'm a cyclist, so I was like dead when I arrived at the hospital, and I do my MRI, and I'm kind of I'm super tired, but I'm smiling. like I've never smiled in my life. And
Yeah,
then my
one day old
doctor,
baby.
exactly, and I usually have a big smile, so it says a lot. And then my doctor comes in, and for the first time, she doesn't have like a smile on her face. I have an amazing doctor, or her everything here, and she's like, I don't like these images. It's growing fast. We need to stop this. We need to act. Basically, it became cancer, and it became an aggressive tumor. So we need to act with either surgery or radiation, and likely both. And so that started a very shaky
Ugh,
week. What was supposed to be one of the best weeks of my life was
yeah.
a little bit, yeah, um, changed from the outlook changed, let's say. So I ended up staying that week, and then flying to Belgium after a week to get my radiation done there, because it was 6 weeks every day, and we wanted to do paternity maternity leave in Belgium because our parents were there, and it was the occasion to kind of spend time with our friends in the country, and we were also going to go to the south of France. And I think everyone's reaction a little bit was the same, because the outlook wasn't great at that time. There's people that once they have I think the average time that you still live once you have the cancer diagnosis of a brain tumor is 18 months. So that would have been 6 months ago for me.
Mm,
Um, no, that would have been in 3 months. Sorry. Um, so yeah, but it would have been, I would have been in worse shape than I was right now. So we acted, and luckily, the one thing that I had done that was quite different from the norm is I hadn't been irradiated yet, because my surgeon was always, let's do that as late as possible, which is not the habit of usual neurosurgeons, but he has a different way of doing things, which is
okay.
also why I went to him. And he wanted to
Huh.
protect quality of life, not years of life. And so that meant, having the radiation as late as possible, because radiation has consequences. And indeed it had, because also partly because the end of my radiation was not really managed well by the doctors there. I'm not here to complain, but there was an issue. There was an error made in the way they went down with the anti-inflammation medication, the corticosteroids, basically, where they told me to kind of go down to 0 in 2 weeks, whereas the protocol would have been 6 months. And so I went down very aggressively, and in about 3 days, I couldn't move my left foot anymore. I ended up
Oh
being
my God.
paralyzed, fully paralyzed, and like the lower left leg for about 3 months until
Holy
September.
God.
And that's part of what's coming back now. When I mentioned that, more or less at the start when we did the intro of the podcast. So yeah, I'm never gonna be able to run again. Most likely, I'm most likely never gonna be cycling anymore. At least not on a normal bike. Whereas I was doing triathlon before, so no, that's been hard to accept.
Mm,
But at the same time, I think to your original question of acceptance, and at some point, I think it's about self-convincing yourself. Um, you either accept it or you're angry at it.
mm,
Um, and anger is not going to bring anything positive into your life. And in the end, I would be angry because my life is going to be shorter than other people. I'm likely not going to see my kids in school. I'm most likely never going to be a grandfather and things like that. But you can choose to focus on that and everything
mm.
that you will miss, but then making yourself miserable. Or you can focus on what you still have and the fact that you're still there. And that's what I'm trying and fighting every day to do. Um,
Wow.
Sabine could tell you that it's not easy every day. I've had dark times last summer. I've had dark times like the last 2 weeks again. So it's an everyday fight. It's like a little bit like ego, it's an everyday fight to kind of put it under a carpet. But yeah, the question that was asked by Chris, who do you think that haven't thanked enough, or that you haven't thanked? Well, there's a reason why, is because she wouldn't understand. But I'm thanking my daughter now, because she's the light of my days, and she's the one that kind of keeps me going, and also helps me, in the last year, looking for a job, having been fired from a job where I was both in paternity leave and medical leave, diagnosed with cancer, which was to me one of the most like treacherous things that anyone ever did to me,
Yeah.
but just accepting to not to file for, not to go and take a lawyer and go to trial, and just accepting that like has been hard. I think accepting the handicap has been harder, especially as being a very sporty person. But you need to find things that motivate you and make you happy, because I try to remind myself of what I always say to the people that ask me, but why did you have kids? Knowing that you have that, you will give them a future likely without a father. You work in the environmental space, so you know that there's going to be a planet that's burning and so on. I'm like, yes, but life is better than no life. Life is amazing. There's so many things to enjoy, and just like listening to a bird in the morning, or listening to music with friends, having a great glass of wine, having a great conversation like we had at Chris, like those small moments are what make the journey, because again, there's no goal, what make the journey an amazing time. And that's why I still want to have kids, because I want to give that. I think it's the beautiful thing you can give to someone is life. And so I think the most beautiful thing you can give yourself is a life without worrying, a life just enjoying what you have, instead of focusing on what you don't have anymore, or the future you won't have.
This is so ninja. This is really amazing. And I think what I was so moved by when we were at that dinner, you talked about this private podcast that you wanted to, like have years and years of your daughter and future child to always be, you're always talking to them, whether you're here or not. Can you tell me more about it? Because it is so beautiful.
Of course, it links back with the conversation we had on the shrink earlier. I kind of went back to my shrink in June, and the first question she asked me is like what's your biggest fear? Um, and I was like, to me, it's for me not to be a presence. It's just in their life, just for me to not to have mattered in their life. And I realized that because my mother's mother, so my biological grandmother on the mother's side, died when my mother was pretty young. And it's a little bit of, I wouldn't say it's a taboo, but it's something that we don't really talk about in the family, to the point where Sabine, who is always curious and, like very, very social person, but very like, interested in everyone's life, asked my mom at the dinner table year ago, like how did she die? And I know that I heard it. I heard that information when I was young, and I think I put that under carpet. She committed suicide. And that kind of made me understand also why we didn't talk about it, and why it was hard for my mom to talk about it. But the consequence of that was like that person disappeared and had no impact in my life. I literally don't even know her first name anymore.
Wow.
And so that was my answer. That's my biggest fear. So what are you going to do about it? Like contingency plan, action, reaction. And so she was like, should you write to your daughter? And I was considering it for a while, but I couldn't find a right tone where I would like, what would I write to them? Like, write like something for when you're 2 years old or 1 year old, and like, I love you, and I don't know. Like, I didn't find any inspiration, and then I ended up in a spontaneous conversation with two close friends in Brussels, that both have done, for professional reasons, a podcast recently. And it's something that's, we're way behind in Europe versus the US on podcasts, but it's something that's really gaining momentum significantly in the last years. And I had seen them theirs, or heard theirs, and liked it, and we were discussing that, and I suddenly realized the conversation we're having right now, this could be recorded, and this would be actually pretty cool for our kids to listen to, because we're
Mhm.
being spontaneous, we're being our true selves with like two close friends. And if we were to record that, I think it would be nice to listen to, just even ourselves. And ironically, the name of the restaurant we were in at that moment was Longue Vie, so long life.
Mm. Live forever.
There you go. Yeah. So that, I didn't realize it on the moment, but I went to sleep that night and I was like, man, I have it. I I mentioned it before. I'm that kind of social person, and where I find my energy is where I want to kind of. It's also what I want to give to my kids, and part of it is also that they see me. I think you communicate a lot with your voice, but you communicate so much also visually and with your with your body language. It's for them to show that it's not only that I write to them that I've even though everything is happening, like I'm happy and I have a smile on my face. I want to show that to them. I want to kind of be able to communicate, who I was, and I think that's part of what it is. And so I decided to record those interactions, which are from 1 to 4 friends that I invite podcast studio. I have currently only one recording in New York because I have less close friends here than I do in Brussels. So that's why it's kind of I'm struggling to kind of move forward because it's just taking a lot of my time every time I'm back in Belgium, but I also want to enjoy the time with the family. So I need to strike
Yeah.
that balance. And I just kind of thought about the people around me and thought about on another list, thought about the topics that are important to me. And I kind of matched both very, I think, naturally. I have like I have 4 close girlfriends, and we talked about like man woman friendship and how that's
Yeah.
important for me, but how that works, how like how that starts, like is there always like an absence of you know um ambiguity, or is like can you make it even if there is ambiguity at the start, things like that. Values that you want to share to your kids. Obviously the environmental topic to me has been a big topic that I discussed with 2 friends, including one that was my colleague in my previous firm. So yeah, it's topics that I wanted to share. Also, I thought about what would the people around me not necessarily share that I could or that I would.
Mm.
It's like, and that's a little bit how we kind of thought about also kind of godmother, godfather. It's kind of what can they bring to the table? Another set of values, another culture. So we chose my best friend who is from Montreal. So he comes with different background, a different culture, different approach in life. He's for certain things the closest person to me, but for others, he has a passion for history. He doesn't think exactly in the same way as I do. Comes from
Yeah.
another culture. He will bring a lot of things that I wouldn't have brought to the table. And that was also kind of a reflection of what are the things that I absolutely want to communicate myself.
This is amazing. And just to, you know, kind of it's almost like how people say at funerals and wakes, like, "Why don't we do this while they're alive?" Like they talk about how great people are, and I love that you're being so intentional about kind of incorporating all of these important pieces of your life, while you can. And I'm curious about, like, finding the joy in those little moments and finding peace in it. Are you always having to choose, or do you feel like it gets easier as you practice this?
Oh, it's a great question. I think it becomes easier because I think it was more work the first time I really kind of tried to kind of go through it. Then it becomes more and more second nature, but still it's the constant fight. But I think I could, I would say that most of my friends would see me as someone that's pretty much in the moment most of the time.
Mhm.
Um, Especially if I'm interacting with someone, kind of that social side, kind of the natural is like, it's overwhelming. So it was a little bit of the natural thing to me not to be too in my head, but I am in my head if I'm alone. And that has also been more the case since I'm in New York. I have less friends, less family here. My wife works long hours. I have a lot of now we have a child. Like it's not like life is not going out every night anymore. And anyway, in New York now, no one can really afford it. But so yeah, I need to remind myself to do that, especially when I don't, like right now, I don't have any way to kind of get rid of my energy by with sports. Like it's more of a struggle.
Yeah. Do you feel headaches? Like, what does day-to-day life feel like, or does it feel normal? Do you feel like, does your body change?
I have like very seldom headaches. I do have some, but it's like a few times a year, usually when there's something very emotional happening. So I've had a couple recently, but my everyday life right now is it's really, I mean, managing the consequences, which is, going to physical therapy, being as dedicated as I can be to kind of being the best version of myself for
Mm.
myself, but mostly for my family, which means not eating bad, sleeping well, not drinking too much, like, like all the things, the pillars I talked about earlier, but also being in the best state of mind. My wife is incredible to have stayed with me throughout all of this, but the worst thing I can give her is shitty last years because I'm in a bad mood. So it's for yourself as much as it is for other people. But it was a struggle in the first months of my daughter's life. Like I wasn't very present. Like I was so tired. I had a lot of headaches back then from the radiation. I was nearly absent. Like my shrink even kind of mentioned that as a hypothesis, I maybe decided not to create a relationship too soon, not to attach myself in case I was dying. Because last year in the summer, I went to see my doctor, the surgeon that operated on me twice, that said that seeing how things were going, he thought I wouldn't be there in 2025 anymore. So he was like,
Wow.
prepare your last
Well,
days. I'm here. I
what do you do when you're in that moment, when you hear that? What does that feel like?
you you say nothing. You swallow it. Um, and then you kind of you look inside you to find hope, find belief, and to kind of,
Mm.
and if that is the case, then you kind of you question yourself a lot on what do I want to do, if that's
Mm.
right. Like, do we go back to New York? Like, do I go and travel the world? That would have been my dreams a year and a half ago. That would have been the thing I would have done. Now we have a little baby girl. Like, it's not the best way for her. Like, babies need regularity. They need the same day over and over again. Something that they need predictability. They need their bed. As much as I would have been a different parent, I think if Sabine wasn't my wife, she was right when she said all those things to me. So yeah, you just find a way to kind of push through and find belief. There's I mentioned my friend Jill earlier. He ended up being treated with like a few experimental drugs, some that got him several more years. So you're just fighting for more. It's like when you're
Mhm.
running a marathon. I think resiliency is something that you build. I had myself the challenge that I wanted to run a marathon before my first surgery. I wanted to do my first Ironman before my second surgery, and I wanted to do my
Wow.
second Ironman before my chemo. So I think it's a muscle that you can train, and what you learn in that is you can always do one more step. Like, it's always possible to do one more step. Like, even if you're super tired and your leg can't take it anymore, you always have one more step in you. Maybe you will have to kind of stop 5 minutes, but you always have it. And so I think that's something that I've developed over time because I wasn't very resilient when I was younger. And yeah, and then I was lucky to have like a doctor in New York that believed in the fact that I could recover, that it wasn't tumor growing, but it was dead cells from the radiation. I'm not gonna make it more complicated than that. And so I got the treatment that they also had recommended in France. So in the end, they were not agreeing on a timeline, but they were agreeing on a treatment, and the treatment worked. So I started to kind of started moving my toes again, my foot, and then like everything
Wow.
started coming back until a few weeks back where I sprained my ankle and everything went backwards again. But yeah, I just have to keep going. I mean, life doesn't stop for anyone,
No,
whether
it
you're sick or
doesn't.
not.
You are so inspiring. Do you feel fear?
Yes, of course.
What do you fear?
I fear not being there next week. I fear like most of my fears now are for my daughter or unborn baby. And then for my wife, and then for my close ones. Yeah, I have some fears, but the real fear I have for myself is the fear to fail and kind of the objectives I set myself, which is leaving that legacy for my kids that they kind of know their father and can learn from my mistakes and kind of anything that they think valuable or they think is interesting from what I have to share. And and also if I can to a wider group, it's mainly for my kids, but if I
Mhm.
can throughout, for example, this conversation give a little bit of hope to one person that I don't know is very ill and is thinking about ending their lives, and that gives hope to that person that there's always hope a little bit further, and you can be happy even not walking anymore and things like that. Like, well, that would be the most amazing. So one of the things that I will do is I'm gonna contact associations of patients, mostly brain surgery patients, but also in general patients in Belgium. I have some people in those networks to see if some of the things I have to share can be valuable for them. I don't think I will
Oh
go
my
wider than that
god.
because I don't want to I don't want to be I don't want this content to be fully public. The things that I mean, obviously this one, yes, but the things that I'm going to share to my kids, but some are destined to be, I think, at least shared with like associations of patients. And if it can give courage to just one person or one parent that has a sick child, well, that's already a huge win.
It's so beautiful, and I kept thinking, as you were talking about, there's so many mindset shifts of things we don't think about, right? Like, I have a lot of friends that have experienced cancer, cancer survivors, and almost every one of them says, you realize that the shit you care about doesn't mean it's bullshit. Like you just kind of laser focus on what matters, and you are living proof of like choosing not to focus on the loss, but the moments of what happens. Like there's so much you can learn from this. Do you fear death itself?
No,
You don't.
no, because number one, it's supposed to go pretty smoothly for me because obviously asked the question. I'm supposed to be more and more fatigued and less interacting with people, and then at some point, I'm just gonna go to sleep. So that's
Wow.
one. I don't have like, but also even if it was painful, I fear more like the fact to kind of consciously have like no value, no added value, and like being already having people around me suffer in the last weeks. But like, I'm actively thinking of going back to Belgium to kind of choose my time a little bit, choose my time to go, and at the time where I think I'm not adding anything. And it's interesting to
Wow.
react on what you said earlier about like doing that while we're not saying thanks while we're still alive or people are still alive. It brought to me a few fun facts, and then I know we're over time, so I'll stop talking. But um, one thing that I did before my first surgery was tell I love you to my parents, and my dad had never told it to me before that, and since then he does. And so yeah, never like I don't know why we're too proud or to say the most beautiful words in all languages, but just put your heart out there and tell people that you love them
Mm.
if you do, because that's never gonna take anything away from you. It's just gonna bring even more because love multiplies. It doesn't withdraw anything. That's the one thing. And then the first thing is I've actually chosen in that context of choosing when I'm going. Right now, my idea is to have a funeral where it's not all black but all colors, and that's kind of a celebration of life because I made it
Okay.
way further than I ever thought. I mean, my first surgery was years ago, so I consider all of that bonus, and I want people to celebrate life. It's how they do it in a lot of other cultures. Like I would travel if you've ever traveled to Bali and see a Balinese funeral. It's a party basically because they're celebrating the amazing life that the person had, and I find that beautiful. And so I want to bring that to kind of my culture, that openness that you get from traveling in other cultures. And the second thing is I have a friend that that started stand-up classes. It's actually the friend that was in the environmental space that I worked with, and I've asked him to work on a longer version of the roast that he did on me for my wedding because he was one of my best men. Um,
That's
and
great.
and we would call it mourir de rire, which is dying from laughing. It's an expression in French. It
Uh-huh.
means like you're laughing so much that you're dying that you can't anymore. And so we want to call it that. And that just before I go, like he does that too, and I'm there in the audience with my close friends and close family, and I go out in a nice way rather than in a sad way.
Oh my goodness. This is like a master class at life. You know, I'm so grateful for your time and your energy and your story and just the I'm leaving feeling like a zillion times happier. Not that I was unhappy before, but it was it's really magnificent what you're doing and the kind of legacy that you're leaving. And I thank you so much for sharing so publicly. You know, life is not easy and a lot of people struggle and isolate when they feel bad and don't know how to sit in the discomfort of things being uncomfortable. And the more we talk about it, the more you give voice to it, the more you give hope and a different perspective, people's lives are going to be changed by you sharing your story today. And I'm really grateful for you. And I'm wishing you and your family as much happiness and joy and good health as the Lord will possibly give you because you are beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thank you for having me.